The wind howled through the frozen valley, carrying sharp flakes of snow that cut like tiny blades. The night was merciless, the cold biting into every living thing that dared to stay outside. In the middle of this endless white storm, a small figure struggled through the snow. It was an alien mother, her arms wrapped tightly around her weak child. Her skin, once a soft shade of blue, had turned pale and cracked from the cold. Her thin clothes were torn, offering no shield against the freezing air. Her child shivered in her arms, small hands clutching her chest. His breaths were shallow, his eyes half closed as if sleep was pulling him away forever. She whispered into his ear, her voice trembling. "Stay awake, my little one. Please stay awake." The cave she had chosen for shelter was no home. It was dark, damp, and filled with sharp rocks, but it was the only place that could shield them from the deadly wind. She huddled in the corner, pressing her child close to her chest. Her body was shaking, not only from the cold, but from fear. Fear of the storm, fear of the hunger inside them, and fear of being found. The world had become cruel. Her people once lived in villages filled with laughter. The sound of children playing, the smell of warm food, and the light of fire had made the night safe. But that life was gone. The hunters had come, strangers with weapons. They destroyed everything, burning homes and scattering families. She had run that night carrying her child, running into the cold. She had never stopped running since. Now the snow had become both her shield and her enemy. It kept the hunters away, but it also drained the life from her child. She looked down at him, his lips trembling as he whispered, "Mama, I'm tired." Her heart broke, but she forced a smile. "Just a little longer, my love, just a little longer." Her stomach growled, empty for days. She had nothing left to give him, no food, no water, only the warmth of her arms. But even that warmth was fading. The cave walls dripped with frozen water, the sound echoing, like slow tears. She pressed her forehead against the child's, praying to anyone who might still listen. The night dragged on, each minute heavier than the last. The wind outside roared like angry beasts. She tried to close her eyes, but every time she did, she feared she would wake to find her child cold in her arms, so she stayed awake, whispering old lullabies, her voice cracked but gentle. Then, in the silence between the storm's cries, she heard it. Footsteps, at first faint, but growing louder, crunching snow under heavy boots. Her body tensed. Fear rushed through her like fire. She pulled her child tighter against her chest, pressing herself deeper into the shadows of the cave. Who could it be? A hunter searching for survivors? Or worse, someone who wanted to finish what the storm had started? Her heart raced. Her hands trembled. She knew she had no strength to fight. If someone came inside, she could only beg for her child's life. The footsteps stopped at the entrance of the cave. A dark shadow blocked the swirling snow outside. The figure stood still, as if listening. She held her breath, every muscle in her body frozen. A small flicker of light appeared, a lantern glowing faintly in the storm. The figure stepped inside. Heavy coat covered in frost, boots wet with snow. A human. Her eyes widened. She had heard stories of humans. Some said they were cruel. Others said they were strange but strong. She had never seen one this close. The human lowered the lantern, his face hidden behind a scarf and hood, but his eyes scanned the cave, sharp and cautious. She pressed her child closer, praying he would not cough, praying the human would not see them. Her heart thumped so loud she feared it would echo through the cave. The child stirred, a small whimper escaping his lips. The human's head turned. At once his eyes locked on the shadows where she hid. For a moment the cave felt silent, only the crackle of the lantern breaking the air. The mother's breath caught. She knew this was the moment, life or death, hope or despair. Her arms shook as she shielded her child. The human stepped closer, his boots crunching on the stone floor. His shadow grew larger. His hand slowly lifted, the lantern higher. The light fell on her face, pale and afraid, and on the child clinging weakly to her chest. Their eyes met. The humans widened in shock at the sight of the fragile pair. For a second, neither spoke. The storm outside screamed louder as if the world itself held its breath, and in that frozen silence, the mother realized her fate had changed. For better or worse, she did not know yet. But she knew one truth. The night would not be the same again. The cave was filled with silence, broken only by the sound of the storm outside and the soft crackle of the human's lantern. The alien mother pressed her child against her chest, her heart beating fast. Her instincts told her to hide, to run, but her body was too weak and her child too fragile. The human stood still for a moment, snow dripping from his coat. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the mother and child. At first, his face seemed hard, unreadable under the dim light. The mother feared the worst. She had seen too many cold stares before, eyes that showed no mercy, eyes that only brought death, but then something changed. The man lowered his lantern slowly, and with his other hand he reached up to pull down his scarf. His face appeared weathered, tired, and lined with scars of old battles. His breath came out in white clouds. His voice, when it came, was rough, but not cruel. "You should not be here," he said quietly, his words simple. The mother clutched her child tighter, her body trembling. She wanted to speak, but her voice failed her. The child stirred in her arms, letting out a soft whimper. The human looked at the child and his eyes softened. It was only a small change, but enough to pierce through the mother's fear. He took a cautious step forward, raising his lantern so the cave grew brighter. The light revealed just how fragile the two were. The child's skin was pale, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, his lips dry and cracked, the mother's clothes torn and thin, her face hollow from hunger. The human stopped only a few feet away. His voice lowered. "If you stay here, the cold will kill you both." The mother finally found her voice, though it shook. We have nowhere else," she whispered. Her words came out weak, almost lost in the howling wind outside. For a long moment, the human said nothing. He studied them as if weighing a choice inside himself. His lantern flickered, shadows moving. Across the cave walls like restless spirits. The mother's thoughts raced. What did this man want? Why had he not already turned away, or worse, drawn a weapon? Humans were not known for kindness, not to her people at least. Then, slowly, the human knelt down, setting the lantern on the ground so its light spread warm across the stone. He opened a pouch at his side and pulled out a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He tore it in half and held one piece forward. The mother stared at it, her throat tightening. The smell of food filled the air. Her stomach growled painfully. She looked at her child, who now opened his eyes weakly at the sight of bread. She hesitated, her pride and fear battling inside her heart. Was this a trick? A test before cruelty? But the child's eyes, tired and hungry, left her no choice. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand and took the bread, breaking off a piece for the boy. The child ate slowly, as if afraid the food might disappear, his small teeth working through the dry crust. His eyes closed, a tiny sigh of relief leaving his lips. The mother almost wept at the sight, but she swallowed her tears. She looked at the human, confused. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you help us?" The human looked into the fireless dark of the cave before answering. "Because no one deserves to die like this." His voice was quiet, but his eyes carried weight. The storm outside raged on, but in the cave the three of them sat in fragile peace. The mother fed her child the rest of the bread, saving nothing for herself. The human noticed, and without a word, offered the second piece to her. She shook, her head whispering, "My child needs it more." The human did not argue. Instead, he set it beside her, letting her decide. Then he began pulling items from his pack. Sticks of dry wood wrapped in cloth, flint, and a small pot. Within minutes, he had struck a spark and a small flame grew, casting light and warmth across the stone walls. The mother gasped softly. She had tried before, but her hands had been too cold and weak to light anything. Now the fire danced before them, pushing back the shadows. The child moved closer to the flame, his face lit with faint color again. For the first time in days, he looked less like a ghost and more like a child. The human warmed his hands and glanced at them, his voice steady. "What is your name?" The mother hesitated, but finally spoke. "Lyra," she said, her voice faint. She held her child tighter. "And this is Cale." The human nodded. "I am Marcus," he replied. The names hung in the air, simple yet powerful. For the first time, they were no longer strangers in the snow, but in the mother's heart, fear had not left. She wondered who this Marcus really was. Why was he here in this desolate land? What did he truly want? The storm howled outside, as if warning her that the world was never so kind without a price, and, yet as the fire burned and her child rested with a small piece of bread in his hands, a spark of hope flickered deep inside her chest. Fragile but alive. The fire crackled softly, its orange glow painting the cave walls with trembling shadows. For the first time in many nights, warmth touched the alien mother's frozen skin. She sat close, her child nestled in her arms, his eyes half closed, but, calmer now, his tiny body leaned toward the flame as if it were life itself. The human, Marcus, sat across from them, his back against the stone wall, his face lit by the flickering firelight. He did not speak much, only watched quietly as the mother broke small crumbs of bread for her child. Lyra chewed her lip as she fed Cale. Each bite was small, but the boy ate slowly, savoring every piece. She had not seen him eat like this in days, and the sight both warmed and hurt her. She herself was starving, but she held back, refusing to take even a crumb from his mouth. Marcus noticed. His sharp eyes had been trained by years of hardship. He could see hunger in her sunken cheeks, the way her hands trembled not only from cold but also from weakness. Without a word, he reached into his pack again. This time he pulled out a small pouch. The smell that escaped made the child's head rise in curiosity. Inside were dried strips of meat, tough but filling. Marcus handed one across the fire. Lyra hesitated, suspicion heavy in her heart. Why would a human give food to her people? Humans had always been enemies. But her son looked up at her with pleading eyes. She could not refuse him. She took the strip, tore it in half, and gave the larger piece to Kyle. The boy chewed slowly, his strength returning with each bite. Lyra placed the smaller piece near her lips. She did not want to eat, but Marcus's steady gaze pressed her. Finally, she took a small bite, the salty taste filling her mouth with a painful reminder of how long she had gone without food. The fire's warmth spread, and for a moment the cave did not feel like a tomb. Lyra glanced at Marcus, his expression unreadable. His hands were rough, scarred, but careful as he adjusted the pot above the flame. Soon steam rose from the pot as snow melted into water. Cale leaned closer, his lips whispering, "Mama, it smells nice." His small voice, weak but hopeful, cut through the silence like light through darkness. Lyra's chest tightened. She had not heard joy in her child's voice for many days. She looked across at the human again, unable to stop her question. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do this for us?" Marcus stirred the pot, his eyes fixed on the water as it began to bubble. For a long moment he did not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, heavy. "Because I have seen too many die in the cold and I could not walk away this time." The answer made her pause. His words carried no lies, only pain. She studied him in the firelight. His face bore the marks of someone who had lost much, scars not only on his skin but deep in his heart. Still, doubt gnawed at her. "Humans have hunted us," she whispered. "Your kind burned our homes, took our families." Her voice shook with anger and sorrow. Marcus lifted his head. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "Not all humans," he said. "Some of us fight to survive, just like you." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that silenced her. Kyle leaned against her shoulder, half asleep now, his small body warmed. By both fire and food, Lyra brushed a hand over his thin hair, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. Marcus poured some of the hot water into a tin cup. He pushed it gently across the ground toward her. "Drink," he said. She hesitated, then lifted the cup. The warmth spread through her hands. She sipped, and the heat traveled down her throat, chasing away the ice that had gripped her insides. She gave some to Cale, watching as he drank eagerly. For the first time, she felt a spark of life returning. The cave grew quieter, the storm outside muffled by thick snow. The firelight flickered softly, and shadows danced around them. Marcus leaned his head back against the wall, his eyes closing for a moment. Lyra studied him again, her mind restless. Was this man a savior or another danger wearing kindness as a mask? She could not tell yet, but she could not deny that without him, her child would not have seen another sunrise. Kyle stirred again, his voice faint but clear. "Mama, he helped us." His small hand reached toward Marcus before slipping back to his side. Marcus opened one eye, glanced at the boy, then let it close again. His lips moved with words barely louder than the fire. "Rest, both of you, the storm will not end tonight." Lyra pulled her child closer, her eyes never leaving the human. Her heart remained cautious, but in the warmth of fire and the comfort of food, a fragile trust began to form. And yet, in the back of her mind, a shadow of doubt remained. Would this stranger remain their protector, or would he demand something she could not give? As the storm raged outside, the question lingered unanswered. The cave held 3 souls now, bound not by blood but by survival. The night was far from over, and fate was only beginning to reveal its hand. The fire burned low, glowing red instead of bright orange now. The storm outside still screamed, but inside the cave there was silence. Lyra sat with Cale curled in her lap, his breathing steady at last. The boy's small chest rose and fell with the rhythm of sleep, his thin fingers clutched in his mother's torn cloak. Marcus sat across from them, his face partly hidden in shadow. He sharpened a small knife against a stone, the sound slow and steady. It was not a threatening sound, but it reminded Lyra of danger. Every scrape of the blade made her think of hunters, of the night when her village fell. Her heart tightened as memories returned. She had buried them deep, but the quiet of the cave pulled them back out. Her lips parted and her voice came like a whisper. It was night like this when they came. Marcus's hand stilled. The blade stopped against the stone. His eyes lifted to hers. She stared into the fire, unable to look at him. The soldiers, the hunters, humans in black armor. They came. With fire and weapons, my people had no chance. We were scattered like birds from a burning nest. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. They killed anyone who tried to fight. They dragged away the strong. The weak were left to starve. Her voice broke. I ran, I carried Cale. I did not stop running, not even when my feet bled, not even when he cried from hunger. Her shoulders trembled, she pulled her child closer, pressing her cheek against his hair. He is all I have now, my husband, my family, all gone. The cold took the rest, and I thought it would take him too. Marcus listened without a word. His eyes did not shift away. He sat still, the knife resting in his hand, but he made no move. He let her speak. Let her grief fill the cave. Lyra wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, ashamed of her weakness. She finally looked up at Marcus, her voice trembling with accusation. And now a human sits before me offering food. Why would you help when it was your kind who destroyed us? The fire popped softly, sparks dancing into the air. Marcus stared at the flame for a long time before answering. His voice was heavy. You think I do not know loss? Lyra frowned, her body stiffening. Marcus's eyes darkened with old pain. I once had a family too. A wife, a daughter. They laughed, they sang. They were my whole world. His hand tightened around the knife's handle, his knuckles white. Then war came. Not against your people, but against mine. Soldiers burned my home, they took my family. When the fire ended, there was nothing left but ash and me. His voice grew rough, each word cut from sorrow. I searched for them. I fought to get them back. But no one cared. The war swallowed them, and I was left with silence. For a moment, the cave felt heavier. The air pressed down on them both. Lyra stared at him, her anger dimming. The scars on his face were no longer just marks of battle. They were the map of his loss, his grief carved into skin and soul. Cale stirred in his sleep, a small sound escaping his lips. Lyra hushed him gently, her heart torn between fear and understanding. She looked at Marcus again, whispering, "So we both lost everything." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes closing as if the weight of memory pressed him down. "Yes," he said simply, "and that is why I cannot leave you to die. I will not watch another child fade in the cold, not while I still breathe." The fire flickered brighter for a moment, casting light across the cave walls. Lyra's hands shook as she smoothed Kyle's hair. Her distrust did not vanish, but a fragile thread of connection tied her heart to the stranger's words. Silence stretched between them. Not empty, but full of things neither knew how to say. At last Marcus leaned forward, feeding another stick into the fire. The flame grew again, chasing away shadows. His voice was low, steady. "The past hunts us both, but maybe we can outrun it together." Lyra's lips parted, her breath catching. The thought of trusting a human still felt like betrayal to the memory of her people. Yet when she looked at her child, sleeping safer than he had in weeks, she knew survival mattered more than hate. Her voice came soft, almost like a vow. "If you mean to help us, then I will walk with you. But if you mean harm, I will fight with every breath I have left." Marcus's eyes met hers, and for the first time there was no wall between them. He inclined his head. "Fair enough," he said, his voice carrying a quiet strength. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cave 2 broken souls shared their truths, and in that fragile honesty, a spark of something new was born. Not trust yet, but the beginning of it. The night still held danger, the world still hated them, but for the first time neither of them felt completely alone. Morning never truly came. The storm had swallowed the sky, turning the world into endless gray and white. Snow fell thick, burying everything in silence. The fire in the cave had burned down to ash, and Lyra knew they could not stay. The cold would return, the food would vanish, and hunters might find them if they lingered. Marcus tightened his coat and checked his pack. His movements were steady, practiced. He looked at Lyra and her child, his voice low but firm. "We must move, there is a shelter not far from here. If we reach it, you will live. If we stay, you will die." Lyra's arms tightened around Cale. The boy still slept lightly, his breath warm against her chest. Fear pressed heavy in her heart. But she knew Marcus spoke the truth. She had carried her son through worse nights, and though her legs ached and her body trembled, she would walk again. Marcus leaned closer. "I will carry him. You protect him in other ways." His eyes met hers, calm but unyielding. For a moment she wanted to refuse, pride telling her not to hand her child to a human, but Cale's weak face, pale as snow, pushed her choice. Slowly, she nodded. Marcus bent down and lifted the boy carefully. Cale stirred, his small arms wrapping around the human's neck as if it was natural. Lyra's heart jumped at the sight, but she stayed silent, wrapping her torn cloak tighter around herself. They stepped into the storm. The wind hit them like knives, swirling snow cut their skin and blinded their eyes. Marcus walked first, each step heavy as he broke through the drifts. Lyra followed close, her body bent low against the winds. World outside was endless white. No path, no sun, only snow and storm. Yet Marcus seemed to know where he was going. His boots pressed deep tracks into the snow, leaving a trail for Lyra to follow. Hours passed like years. Their breaths turned to mist, their clothes stiff with frost. Lyra's body ached, her feet numb, but her eyes never left Cale, who clung to Marcus's shoulders, his small face pressed against the human's coat, seeking warmth. The storm's howl grew louder, echoing like beasts in the distance. Then came the sound, long, low, and haunting. Wolves. Lyra's heart pounded. She had heard them before. They hunted in packs, and in a storm like this, they were desperate. Marcus stopped, turning his head slightly, his jaw tightened. "They are near," he said. His hand gripped the knife at his belt, but he did not slow. "Stay close." The howls grew nearer, Shadows moved at the edge of the snow, dark shapes slipping between the white. Lyra's breath caught. Her body trembled, but she forced her legs to keep moving. She would not let fear win, not while her child lived. One wolf broke from the storm, its eyes glowing faint yellow, its fur matted with frost. It snarled, teeth flashing. Marcus shifted Cale higher on his back and pulled the knife, his stance steady despite the storm. The beast circled, waiting for its pack. Lyra grabbed a broken branch from the snow, her hands raw. She held it like a spear, her voice fierce despite her shaking. "Stay back," she whispered to the shadows. The pack appeared, 3, 4, then 5 shapes. Their growls rose, surrounding them. The storm howled with them, a deadly chorus. Marcus's eyes burned with focus. He spoke over the wind, calm but sharp. "We keep moving, do not stop, do not run. They will follow. But if we reach the ridge, they will not dare climb it." Together, they pushed forward, Marcus keeping Cale shielded on his back. Lyra at his side with her branch ready. The wolves followed, their growls growing louder, snapping closer. The snow became a battlefield of silence and sound, every step a fight. At last, the ridge came into view, a wall of jagged stone rising out of the white. Marcus quickened his pace, his breath heavy but steady. Lyra stumbled beside him, her legs burning, but she pushed herself harder. The wolves lunged, one leaping through the snow. Marcus turned sharply, swinging his knife. The blade cut across its muzzle, and the beast yelped, retreating into the storm. The others snarled, but hesitated. "Climb," Marcus ordered, pushing Lyra toward the ridge. He shifted Cale in his arms and began to climb with strength born from desperation. Lyra scrambled beside him, her fingers clawing into stone. The storm whipped around them, the wolves circling below. Their growls echoed, but they did not follow. The climb was too steep, too dangerous. Finally, they reached the top, collapsing into the snow on the other side. Lyra gasped for breath, her chest burning. She looked at Cale, still clinging to Marcus. Safe. The sight filled her with relief so strong she almost wept. Marcus set the boy down gently. His own chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes scanned the horizon. In the distance, through the storm, a faint glow shone, small but real. "There," he said, pointing. "The outpost, we are close." Lyra followed his gaze. The light was faint, but it was hope. For the first time in many nights, she believed they might see another day. The storm still raged. The wolves still howled, but the 3 of them walked on, bound not by blood but by the will to survive. The storm finally loosened its grip as they neared the glow on the horizon. The light flickered like a beacon, weak but steady. Marcus walked ahead, Kyle resting limply in his arms, while Lyra stumbled close behind. Every step felt like her last, but the promise of shelter kept her moving. At last, the outpost appeared. Through the swirling snow, it was not grand or strong, only a small cabin of stone and wood built against the cliffside. Its roof sagged under the weight of snow. Smoke rose faintly from a crooked chimney. To Lyra, it looked like a palace. Marcus pushed open the heavy wooden door. A wave of warmth and the smell of firewood drifted out. He stepped inside and set Cale carefully on a rough bed made from furs. Lyra followed, her knees weak. Her body shook not only from cold but also from relief. The cabin was simple. A fireplace burned at one end, its flames bright and welcoming. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars, tools, and worn blankets. It was the home of a survivor, not a rich man, but someone who knew how to fight the world and live. Marcus moved quickly. He lit more lanterns, added wood to the fire, and filled a pot with water to boil. His hands worked with purpose, not wasting a second. He had done this many times before. Lyra sat beside Cale, brushing the boy's hair from his face. His skin was still pale, but warmth began to return. She pressed her lips to his forehead, whispering softly, "You are safe now, my little one." Marcus crouched near them, pulling out a small box from a shelf. Inside were bandages, herbs, and bottles of medicine. He opened one and handed it to Lyra. "For the fever," he said simply. Her eyes widened. She had never seen such things. The liquid inside smelled sharp but not unpleasant. With trembling hands, she held it to Cale's lips. The boy swallowed, weakly, his small body relaxing afterward. Tears burned Lyra's eyes. She whispered almost to herself, "You saved him." Marcus said nothing, only nodded and returned to his work. He prepared soup with dried vegetables and meat. The smell filled the cabin, warm and rich. Lyra's stomach growled, but she tried to ignore it. She focused on her child, though her eyes kept stealing glances at the human who moved around the room with quiet strength. When the soup was ready, Marcus poured it into 2 bowls. He handed one to Lyra. "Eat," he said firmly. She shook her head. "Kale first." Marcus frowned. "The boy will eat, but so must you, or you will not last." His tone left no room for argument. Slowly, Lyra lifted the bowl, the heat soothing her frozen fingers. She sipped, the taste filling her with life she thought she had lost. She gave small spoonfuls to Kale, who swallowed eagerly. As the fire warmed them, a peace settled over the cabin. For the first time in many nights, Lyra felt safe. She leaned back, exhaustion heavy in her body. Kale slept beside her, his breathing steady, his face no longer twisted by hunger or cold. She looked at Marcus, who sat across from her, his face calm but distant. His eyes stared into the flames, lost in thought. She wondered what ghosts haunted him here in this lonely shelter. Her voice broke the silence. "Why do you live here alone?" Marcus's gaze shifted. He took a long breath before answering. "The world outside is broken. I built this place to keep away from it, to survive in my own way." His voice was low. "But survival alone is not living. It is only waiting." Lyra's chest tightened. She understood those words more than anyone. She had lived only to keep Kale breathing, not knowing if tomorrow held hope or only more pain. The firelight danced across the room. Kale murmured in his sleep. His hand reaching out, Marcus leaned forward and gently covered him with another fur blanket. The gesture was small, but it struck deep in Lyra's heart. She whispered, "He trusts you." Marcus looked at the boy, then at her. "Children see truth faster than adults," he said. "They know when someone means them harm and when someone does not." Lyra lowered her eyes, ashamed of the fear she still carried. She wanted to trust, but her people's pain was carved too deep. Still, she could not deny what she saw. This man had given her child warmth, food, and life. As the night deepened, the storm outside grew quiet. Snow still fell, but gently now, like soft feathers. The world outside was still dangerous, but inside the cabin there was peace. Marcus stood and checked the windows, then returned to the fire, his voice steady. "You should rest. I will keep watch." Lyra shook her head. "You have done enough. You need rest too." He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw a faint smile on his face, tired but real. "I have watched storms before. One more night is nothing." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. Her body relaxed against the furs, Kale's warmth beside her, the crackle of fire before her. Her eyelids grew heavy. As she drifted towards sleep, a thought warmed her heart. For so long, she had carried despair, believing no one would ever help. Yet here in a stranger's shelter, her child breathed safely, and hope returned, fragile but alive. The world outside still hated, still hunted, but inside these walls, a different truth had been born. A human and an alien shared the same fire, the same food, the same fragile dream of survival, and maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something more. Morning came slowly. The storm outside had faded into silence. Snow still covered the world, but the sky was softer now, pale with weak sunlight. Inside the cabin, the fire still glowed, spreading warmth and life. Lyra awoke first. Her eyes opened to the sound of steady breathing. Kyle was curled beside her, his face calmer than she had seen in many weeks. His lips no longer cracked, his skin no longer ice pale. He looked like a child again, not a shadow of one. Across the room, Marcus sat in a chair, his head bent forward in sleep. The knife he had been holding rested loosely in his hand. His body leaned toward the fire, his face lit with orange light. For a moment he looked younger, not the scarred, Man of war she had met, but someone who had once known peace. Lyra's chest tightened. She had feared this man. Yet here he was, the reason her child still lived. She pulled the blanket closer around Kyle, whispering, "We are safe, little one." Kyle stirred, his eyes opening slowly. He looked around, confused for only a moment, then his gaze fell on Marcus. His small voice broke the quiet. "Mama, who is he?" Lyra hesitated, her lips parting, but no words came. Before she could answer, Marcus shifted, waking from his light sleep. His eyes opened, steady as always. He set the knife aside and stood. Stretching his tired body, he looked at the boy and gave a small nod. "I am Marcus," he said simply. His voice was calm, not forcing trust but offering it. Cale blinked at him, then looked at his mother. "He helped us," the boy said softly. A child's simple truth. Lyra swallowed, nodding. "Yes, he did." Marcus moved to the fire and poured warm water into a tin cup. He handed it first to Cale, then to Lyra. "You both need strength," he said as they drank. The cabin filled with the smell of fresh soup again. Marcus had already begun preparing food before sleep claimed him. His hands worked without thought, every motion practiced from long days of survival. When they ate, Cale smiled faintly, his cheeks no longer hollow. Lyra watched him with tears in her eyes. She turned to Marcus, whispering, "I cannot repay you." Marcus looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You do not need to," he said. "Keeping him alive is enough." The word struck her heart. She had lived only for that single purpose, to keep Cale breathing. Now someone else had carried that burden with her. A human. The day passed quietly. Marcus fixed the cabin roof, chopped wood, and checked his traps outside. Lyra cleaned and helped as she could. Her body was still weak, but she forced herself to work. For the first time since her village burned, she felt like part of something, not just a shadow running from death. Cale followed Marcus around the cabin. His small steps clumsy but eager, he asked questions in his soft voice. "Why do you cut the wood like that? What is this tool? Why do you carry a knife always?" Marcus answered patiently, his voice steady, his movements careful. Lyra watched from the fire, her heart caught. Between fear and wonder, her son had not spoken this much in weeks, not since the world had fallen apart. Marcus had brought him back to life in ways she could not. As evening fell, they sat again near the fire. Cale curled between them, his head resting against Marcus's arm. The boy's eyes grew heavy, but before he drifted to sleep, he whispered a single word, small but powerful. "Papa." The sound froze the air. Lyra's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. She turned to Marcus, uncertain. Marcus himself went still. His body stiffened. His eyes staring into the flames. For a moment he did not move. Cale repeated softly, his voice almost fading into sleep. "Papa?" His hand clutched Marcus's sleeve before falling limp. Marcus's throat worked as if he wanted to speak but could not. His eyes shone with a light Lyra had never seen before. He lowered his head, one hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. His voice broke in a whisper. "I once had a child who called me that." Lyra's breath caught. Her heart ached with his sorrow. She reached out, her hand brushing his arm. "Then maybe," she whispered, "fate has given you another chance." Marcus looked at her, his eyes raw with emotion. For so long he had lived only to survive, empty and alone. Now this fragile child had given him a name that carried more weight than any burden, a name that bound him to something greater than survival. The fire crackled. The storm outside had ended, and inside the cabin, 3 souls sat not as strangers, but as something closer to family. Lyra leaned back, her hand resting on her son's chest, feeling the steady beat of life beneath. For the first time since her world was destroyed, she did not feel alone. Marcus sat silently, his eyes fixed on the boy. A man who had once lost everything now found a new reason to fight, not for war, not for revenge, but for the fragile lives beside him. The night grew calm, the wind gentle. The cabin stood strong against the snow. Inside, hope was alive, and so, in a world torn by hate and loss, a human and an alien found each other, not as enemies but as family, proving that one act of kindness could change fate forever.